Good morning to everyone. My name is Luciano Saso. I'm the president of UNICA, and I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to this important webinar on how to lead climate action in universities. And this is organized by the UNICA Green Working Group, which is a very important working group in UNICA, created in 2010 due to an initiative by UNICA students. The UNICA students, they gathered in Rome in 2010, and they asked us, the leadership of UNICA, why not doing more for the university to induce them to become greener, to deal with these important environmental issues. And immediately, the leadership of UNICA at that time reacted, creating a working group which has been really very active for many years. I had the pleasure and the honor to participate in some of these meetings, and I found them always very, very interesting. And now, due to the COVID, unfortunately, it's very difficult to meet in person, so we decided to organize a series of webinars. And I think this is really an excellent idea, because these webinars can be a little bit shorter, and it's easier, I think, for all of us to find the time to participate and to discuss and to be together, despite this tragic and difficult period of of course, COVID period. I would like to thank the coordinators of this UNICA Green working group. And now, without further ado, I would like to leave the floor to one of them, to Inês Cabrita, who is a project leader in the environmental and the mobility department of Université libre de Bruxelles and coordinator of this group. So Inês, you have the floor.
Yeah, just a few more. Hi everyone, just a few more words about UNICA Green. So the objective of the group is really to share good practices and create peer learning for sustainability. We see ourselves as a dynamic, informal, open space where universities that have the same challenges can share and help each other to implement sustainability. So if you'd like to know more about the working group or join us, let us know. You can reach us by mail. Thanks.
So before to start with the first presentation, we would like to ask you 2 questions. So take your smartphone, open your browser and go on www.menti.com, please, and add the following code, 479417. So the first question is, in which city is your university or institution located? So thank you very much. The next question is, where is your university on the road to carbon neutrality? You can choose between the following options. We haven't started yet. We measured our carbon footprint. We have a climate action plan. We are carbon neutral. Okay. So thank you very much for your participation. And now I give the floor to the first speaker, Rebecca Lefevere. The floor is yours.
Rebecca, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm still muted.
It's okay now.
Okay, okay, there we go. Thank you for the introduction. It was interesting to see the Mentimeter, to see on which things we have to focus in the coming presentation. I'm Rebecca Lefevere, Sustainability Manager at VUB, and I would like to take you into the story of how did we calculate our climate impact and what was the importance of it towards climate action and strategic planning at VUB. But I first like to start with a quick sharing of the role of climate action in our bigger strategic plan. Director is now designing a strategic plan for 2024, and there the goal is set to grow radically towards sustainable development in an SDG framework, as you all recognize. And the Sustainability Action Plan, I'll move the audience over there. And the Sustainability Action Plan is the big overlapping plan. And it's also including, for example, the social and the people targets in the Wellbeing Action Plan, the Gender and Diversity Action Plan. But now, coming years, the Task Force Sustainability, working on the sustainable implementation at VUB, is putting the stress on the biosphere aspects, on the planetary boundaries. And we've given the board has gave us a few days ago the go to really focus on this the first coming years. I would love to share with you a very planned timeline for climate action, but reality was different and will probably be different also in other institutions. The baseline carbon footprint measurement and estimation measurements calculation was not really the start of a story, of a timeline, but rather the start of a set of interlocking actions, gearing up things, and we started with a calculation, and then a whole lot of actions started to happen. So climate action already happened before we did our second monitoring. But to be short, we started in 2016, did a follow-up monitoring in 2018, and 2021 will be the year where we will deliver our climate action plan, our calculated climate action plan. What did we take into the scope of our carbon footprint? Because it's a very big exercise to make. We've always asked ourselves the question, what can we measure? What can we influence? We took into account our main campuses, both administration, research, and education, all the student housing owned by VUB. We also have students living in private student houses, but we cannot influence except by a little bit of awareness raising. We've also included the student restaurants owned by VUB and sporting facilities. Scope 1 and 2 of your carbon footprint, that's quite straightforward. It's your direct and indirect energy use. So it's your gas use, but also your produced and procured electricity, your indirect energy, and also all the cooling gases you use on campus, the refills, but also the end of life of your cooling machines. And they have a bigger impact than you would think. But scope 3, that was really the hard one. And I know a lot of fellow universities are struggling on this one. What do you put in your scope 3? What is the value chain of a university? And therefore we sought the help of a third party to really define what is our scope 3. What impact categories to take into account. So therefore, we went to see a third party, an external consultant who had an accreditation for ISO reporting and greenhouse gas protocol reporting, so that we have a comparable, globally acceptable framework to work in. And we did take into account all our inputs. So it's all kind of materials you procure as a university. We've taken into account all waste generated on campus. We've incorporated the waste due to student courses and mobility of students and staff. So for students, international students, we only took the incoming students. The outgoing we've assessed as being in another university's footprint. It's all about assessing and taking assumptions. And the staff, we both took the commuting and the international exchange and business trips. Also, capital goods was a big one in our carbon footprint. And capital goods, what is it? It is the buildings you own, the buildings you use, the construction, the production of these buildings, and also the maintenance, the parkings, or own fleets, and ICT hardware you use at the university of staff. Students, it's rather their own responsibility. This brought us to this big pie. It's the pie of 2018 I'm presenting here. And you already see from far away the reddish colors. This is the main carbon impact we have as a university. It is mobility. The second big shot is energy. So our direct and indirect energy use are in this green part. And you see all the other things. Direct waste, for example, it's only 1%. While when asking to students, what do you think is our biggest climate impact? A student most of the time will answer it's waste, it's plastic. So it's an eye opener, and it's also showing the systemic approach you need to use when working towards climate action. It was an eye opener for a lot of people. Despite this big figure doesn't really says a lot. It's 42,000 tons, but you need to know the size of our university. So we have about 19,000 students, 3,800 staff members. So it's about per student. So our operational unit, it's 2.5 tons CO2 per student. So people who've already calculated could compare here. If you would like to know more in detail on our carbon footprint, you can go on our website, and there you can find all our reports, our full reports, our calculation methods in English on this website. Okay. The data issue with carbon footprinting, it's also a slight word. So how do you calculate your climate impact, your CO2 equivalent emission? So you need to find the quantity you used of something. There's a lot of data management to do with it, and external control we had by the external consultant. And then you multiply this by ton CO2 for the country you live in, the situation you live in. There are different protocols for that. We've chosen the French one, the bilan carbone. It's according to Greenhouse Protocol, as I said before. Setting up this kind of data exercises, calculation, estimation exercises, it requires a network of a lot of data providers in your university, because you need qualitative data, you need good data, and you also need to make credible assumptions when you miss data. So it's key to well document which assumptions did you make, and that you can track this also in the future for your next calculations. And while doing this calculations, it also gives you insights on processes in your university on which you were not aware before. And for example, we had thanks to the carbon footprint, we really have now a good relation with our accountancy department, which can really show us where to act, where to gain efficiency for them, to make the university more lean, but also to save a lot on our environmental footprint, on our carbon footprint, because often they are very inefficient processes, like, for example, in procuring ICT hardware or furniture, for example, or think about business trips. So it's always there's also a win in it, an economic win and efficiency win, next to the carbon impact that you're really making together visibly. So that was one of the strengths we felt in the process of doing this carbon footprint exercise. It was worth the struggle afterwards. We've done it twice, and by doing it twice before we started our climate action plan, we've also learned a lot. Pitfalls, but also quick wins, and also the action domains on which we have to work. So I think we all agree, transporting people, it's a domain that really needs attention at VUB. We're a commuting university. We have a big mobility impact. But something happened between 2016 and 2018. While all our data were better than in 2016. So we had less emission, we had less energy use, less gas use, more car use, and still we have 5,000 tons more CO2. So what happened? Something really small, which we wouldn't have known without this. So there was a change of energy contract. So in 2016, we've bought green energy. In 2018, the contract has changes. No one knew, but VUB has the ambition to buy green electricity. But in the procurement procedure, that ambition got lost, and we bought, by coincidence, grey electricity, and we had an extra emission of 5,000 tons. So it's also a tool, a carbon footprinting, to well monitor also if all the ambitions are kept in your university you had before. Now I'm going to some big concrete actions showing up during this carbon footprinting, on which we will focus in our climate action plan. Sorry. Here you see our commuting model splits. So we have two big campuses. We also have smaller ones with less than 100 researchers. So for the big shots, we see the car use really decreased up to 12% on our main campus, and on the other campus it decreased from about 60 to 54%. So we thought, oh great, our carbon footprint, our emissions are already going to decline, but they didn't. They stayed stable. They remained stable. And what people apparently tend to move more in the bigger cities in the 2 years that come, because we have more train networks in Belgium and more flexible trains. So they went to live in the bigger cities further away of university. So we had much more travel, many more travel kilometers, commuting kilometers to university. And this showed us the importance of this key action, really to reduce the number and the length of trips. Unfortunately, in 2020, we could already practice a lot on this measure due to Corona and the blended and distance learning. We did not meant it to do it this way 100%, but we want to go something in between. And now we've decided also at VUB to remain also in the track of this blended working and learning. So it will be something stable in future. We will, with HR department, develop a kind of flexible mobility budget, so people can commute flexible, but they can also work from home and so on. And one of the ambition is in the longer term to go up to 50% of campus working when it's possible. And it's really our most impactful climate action, because 10% less traveled kilometers in total, it's 1,000 tons of emission reduction in a year. Another big one, you see here in the pie chart. So it's only the mobility part. So it's the half of the biggest pie you've seen in the beginning. It's all mobility pie, and it's split up in employees commuting, international students coming in, Belgian students commuting, and employees business travel. We've also developed together with other Belgian universities here in the meeting a business travel policy on 3 main focuses. It's all about avoiding your trip, so being critical. Do I need to make this trip, or can I go online? It's about booking alternatives and making the booking of trains more available when it's less than 6 hours of travel, and it's compensating your emissions. We've also working towards a central procurement. We're nearly finished in a few days. We're ready of our international travel, with then the automatic use of this travel policy. So it's also something that already has been developed with the lessons learned in the carbon footprint exercise. Other lessons learned, but also questions remaining we have is, we agree at VUB it's a powerful tool to broaden the scope of our community. So it's not only about energy and waste, it's a bigger picture. We need to communicate transparent. So one thing with the carbon footprint is, it's an estimation, not a calculation. So it is no exact data. And also we should not focus on the data only. It's a bigger picture. It's also about life quality, but you can link all these things in a systemic approach. And also one other thing we've learned and we're still thinking about, maybe other universities already have an answer on that, is what to do with offsetting, especially in scope 1 and 2. If you procure green energy, and then you start with energy reductions, you will see it less than switching from gray to green energy. So that's something we need to think about, how to cope with offsetting with buying carbon credits, especially in the longer term. Our next steps for next year, I think Inês and Alexandra, my colleagues of the ULB, will already take you on this path because they have already done this exercise, is developing really an action plan. And we aim to really calculate possible emission reduction next year and in 2022. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Rebecca, for this excellent presentation. And now we continue with the following presentation. The discussion will be at the end. I ask all participants to write the questions in the chat because we will open the discussion at the end of the session. And also, please be aware that the presentations will be posted online, and also the recording of this webinar. So you can disseminate also the information about this event, because maybe other people could be interested in looking at the recording later on. And now it's a pleasure to give the floor again to Inês, together with Alexandra Demoustiez, Sustainability Director of the Université Libre de Bruxelles. Please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Luciano. So today's presentation is really about giving some insights on the methodology we used at our university to develop and implement our climate action plan. Of course, we are not claiming this is the perfect methodology, but hopefully you can pick up a few useful ideas or even apply it to other situations. So see, this is the path we followed from our carbon footprint measurement to the implementation of our climate action plan. So we will follow this path during the presentation and give more details for each step. So starting with the carbon footprint measurement, the last one we have is for the year 2018. So as you can see on this graph, almost half of our carbon footprint is due to energy and infrastructure, and the other half is due to mobility, so flight and road travel. So it's very similar to what Rebecca's presented. We have more than 30,000 students and about 50,000 staff. So clearly, if we want to reduce our carbon emissions, we need to focus on mobility and energy. Then in 2019, it was the year we built the climate action plan. In 2019, there was really a positive momentum with all the engagement from the students in the street, and also at our university, the staff and the students asked our authorities to commit more to climate action. And so we are asked to build a climate action plan within 1 year. And this would allow us to reduce our emissions by 2030 and be on the road to carbon neutrality. That's we refer to that as the operation axis. And then it would allow us to adapt to the effects of climate change. That's what we call the education and research axis. But today's presentation is really going to focus on operation. So of course, we didn't start from zero. There were a lot of actions and plans already going on, but the idea was really to have like a hat for all of these and take it to the next level. So the first step in our methodology was to define the scope of our climate action plan. And so we did that based on our carbon footprint and benchmark of other universities and cities and institutions. So we have 7 main teams. For energy, we have buildings, IT, and labs. For mobility, we have home campus travel, business travel, and student exchange and logistics. And we also have food. Even though food is not a big contributor to our carbon emissions, it was still important to include it because there was really a demand from the community to have a more sustainable food. Then we created for each team a 2030 vision. So the idea was really to picture the ideal situation in 2030 So to think what we would like to achieve instead of thinking what would be the obstacles. After that, we entered into a consultation phase. So as we had only 1 year to create the plan, we did not run an extensive consultation phase, but we organized 7 thematic working groups with around 10 to 12 people each. And we brought together academics, operational staff, and students. It was both a mix of experts and users. And we used collective intelligence approach. So first, we presented the vision, the 2030 vision, and we asked the participants to improve it, correct it, and then validate it. And then since from the moment we shared this vision, we asked, okay, what do we need to do now to reach it? And so the participants could give actions, and it was really in a brainstorming mode. You could give a small action, easy to implement, but also a big action that would take a lot of work. There was no, let's say, frame. And finally, we concluded by asking the obstacles and levers to reach the vision. After that, with the input of the working groups, we built the climate action plan. So here the idea was really to structure all these actions. And so for each team, we set the objectives. So for energy and mobility, we have 14 goals. And for each goal, we have an operational action plan. So for these two teams, we have a matrix of 64 actions. And so at this stage, we thought about the obstacles, and we make sure that for an objective to see what would be the obstacles, and that we have an action that would allow us to remove these obstacles. So after this first phase, we presented our climate action plan to the board, and so we got the approval to continue. And the next step was really to quantify and identify our priority actions. And so I'll leave the floor to Alexandra for this next part of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Inês. Hello, everybody. Then we arrived to the board with the matrix of 64 actions, and I really want to focus on an action plan and a road plan, and not to start to study all the 64 actions, because otherwise we lost more than 3 years. Then we're using an external consultancy, Climax, because it's easier to have more objective from an external consultancy instead of internal task force. We use in both, but depending on the time and the way you have to decide, you're using one or another one. And we screen all the 64 action with 5 criteria, 5 indicators. The greenhouse gas emission potential reduction, the return on investment of the action, the financial investment of the action, the reputation and visibility of this action, not just on visibility on international aspect, on concurrency between one on another university, but also the visibility for the students in order to be an exemplary, because if we teach climate challenges and social aspects of those things, we have also to manage concretely and on an exemplary way our campus. And it's not, we are perfectible on this, and it's not the case for the moment. We have to improve that. And the other aspect also is the way to implement the action, if it's an easy way or really difficult. Then we have a spire for each action, and we filter with these indicators, and we arrive to a matrix of 24 quantifiable actions. And then we decide to focus on 6 priority actions. Why to 6 priority action? As I mentioned, we really want to start a a concrete and action plan, and not just a political plan, but with no concrete action. We have 10 years to reduce our carbon footprint, and we have to use each year quickly and efficiently. We can go to the next slide, Inês. Thank you. The sixth priority action has been present on the way. The first one is the most impact on our carbon footprint. The first one, if we really want to reduce our carbon footprint, it's travel on the business travel policy. The second one is working on space management, the way you're using our space, the way you allocate your space, the way we rent our space. For the moment, the university opened every building from 7 a.m. to 22 p.m. and we start to monitor the occupancy of the space, but it's just the limit of our space management. And the space management is really an action important on the way we all the time, because we have a huge increasing of students more and more. And our building action plan is really well, now it changed with the COVID, but 2 years that they are approved to construct 2 or 3 new buildings, but still, all the space already constructed are not using at full and efficiently. Then space management is really a huge action. The third one is regarding energy, and it's more classic on a carbon footprint. It's working on the isolation of the buildings and all the renovation. And then the action is to define complete and concrete building renovation plan, because for our university, we have a small budget for building renovation. And then we make some renovation, not to thinking about all the building and all the aspects, but just to think about the roof or just about the window, but not in the complete side of the building. Then the action of the building renovation plan is really to have a structural and complete renovation. For each building will be completely renovated and well thinking. The fourth action is regarding IT equipments and the coolers. We have a cooler policy. It's really, we don't have a lot of cooler space, only for data center. And then we are working on a data center, because it's really energy consumption, really huge one. We will construct a new data center and we will renovate the other one, but also we have to work on the IT equipment of each faculty, of each members, of each staff, because it's really not rational and we have no purchase criteria on IT equipment for the moment. The fifth action is regarding energy consumption efficiencies, like for example, implementing climate curtains for certain buildings and some other action like that. And the last one, it's regarding mobility, homework. Officially, before 2020 and before the COVID, we are not officially allowed to homework. It's changed completely. And also we work on fees reimbursement policy on home mobility, how to travel from home to campus and vice versa. That's our 6 priority action. If we apply those actions with the concrete results, we will reduce from 13 to 45% our global emission in 2030 versus 2018, business as usual. Like I mentioned, it's really concrete action, but it's a pool of action, because of course, when we work, for example, this year on the building renovation plan, it's just not to define a plan. And also you have a lot of prerequisites before this action, and a lot of other aspects to manage: the transversality, the human resources, because you have some let's say difficulties between, for example, one department to another one on an energy aspect, and they don't talk to each other, then you have to manage those kind of things also. Then you should be really transparent. And you also have to use the monitoring, the governance. Then it's really a pool of action. I just present the title of the action, but behind the title, we have 6 or 7 prerequisite or action. We go to the board on December 2019 with this 6 priority action. And as I mentioned, I really go to the board, mention it. Okay, we have a matrix of 64 action. We identify 6 priority action. Please approve those 6 priority action. Of course, it will not enough. We will have more action, but the idea is really approve those action now in order that we can start in 2020, and then we will come back to you in 2 or 3 years with another set of action that we can improve in 2025. I think that's the way to work. It's really not an institutional plan, it's really a roadmap with concrete action. And they follow us, they approve the 6 action, and they liberate 22 million. That's the minimum. Like I mentioned on the boards, that's the minimum 22 million in order to implement 1 or 2 action. Of course, with 22 million, you cannot renovate the buildings like our ambitions. And then I really mentioned to the board that, okay, the 22 million is the starting, and you needed that. You needed a budget line for your climate action plan. Otherwise, you cannot do anything. But I mentioned that we have a financial delta to find, and it's more than 80 million. Then I think it's really an important point that you have the engagement of the board, but also a financial engagement. Next step, to implement. Of course, we decide to implement the 6th action. We don't start with the 6th action in the same time. And then we put a roadmap for each priority action, the responsible, the stakeholders, the task, the timeline, and the budget. That's really classic management. But one important thing that I want to share with you is to define the governance of the climate action plan. It seems easy. It's not easy at all, especially on our case, for example, because the decision flow is not clear and we still work on silo. And the climate action plan is not the climate action plan of Alexandra or Inês. It's the climate action plan of the university and should be integrated in all the departments who have some responsibility on that. And then it's really important to construct a co-responsibility approach in order to define the governance. It took more than 6 months to really define the governance, and it's really still organic and systemic approach, because it's really to change the way to tackle some topics like sustainability needs, but the governance is really an important matter. The roadmap is, just the success to 2020. We have achieved one big issue. It's that we define a new building renovation plan. It seems easy, but it's not easy at all. And it's just been approved 1 month ago. Then we have now a roadmap for the 10 next year. And we also work on the mobility reimbursement fees. That was an action in the pipe for more than 8 years. And they are deblocked thanks to the climate action plan. Why? Because we have the budget. And that's really why I focus on the budget line, because it's really helpful, because it's not our budget, it's the budget for the actions. And then when we go back to the HR, mentioned now it's time to work on the mobility action plan. Yeah, but we don't have the money. Yes, we have the money now, then we can work on it. We have 22 million and we focus on this. And that could help. Okay. Next steps.
Sorry, Alexandra, one minute to.
Okay, I'm going
because
quickly.
We need to leave some space at the end for discussion. Thank you.
Okay, next steps, continue, refine our carbon reduction targets, because we just have some few targets, but we sort of fine-tuning those ones. We have to work more with the faculty. We have no time to do everything at the same time. Then for the 2021, we will launch the consultation and improvement of the climate action at the faculty side and on the student level. And of course, we still have to discuss more and more, discuss and identify synergy with the regions on the city climate action plan, also a European climate action plan. Lessons learned, Inês?
Yeah, so the first one would be to be ready to seize the opportunity. So the idea behind this is that, as I mentioned, we are not starting from zero. We had actions and plans, but we needed the good timing to really implement that. And so the idea here is really to be ready. Like when a moment comes, you are ready to say, and you have all your ideas, the reflections, the analysis you need to really implement the action.
Other lessons to work on collective intelligence works. It's really useful and helpful for transversality.
Then use internal and or external expertise, so it helps to accelerate really the things.
Come back with a step-by-step philosophy, because we are in an academic world and sometimes they want to define everything behind to start something, and sometimes you should work more on steps-by-step philosophy.
And then clarify the governance. So as Alexandra mentioned before, it's important to know what are the responsibilities, the mandates in the decision flow. So thanks.
Thank you.
So thank you very much to both of you. And it was really a very interesting presentation. So really a very interesting webinar. Thank you, Inês and Alexandra. So we have several questions and we only have 15 minutes left. So we have to really try to give very short answers to these questions. So the first two are related to food. We have a question from Ulrika Lundgren from the University of Gothenburg, asking to Rebecca, did you measure the impact from food? And also Delphine Dussault from Université de Lausanne is asking food counts in general for 1/3 of an individual carbon footprint. Do you say it is not important because the catering actors should be responsible for it? How, however, take it into account? Can you please very quickly, Rebecca, and maybe also, of course, the others, the other panelists, Inês and Alexandra, of course, can intervene.
We did take into account our foods use, so our agricultural impact, it's called in our footprint, but we only taken into account the food prepared and eaten in our canteens. In our own canteens, we have 2 big student restaurants on the big campuses, so we only taking into account this one. We had a lot of discussion and thoughts beforehand on that, but we've decided to do this because that way we had clear data with not too much estimation problems, and we also could monitor the impact of things we were doing, because other universities also choose to include the food that students eat on their cots and so on, and you can influence that as a university by awareness rising on the ecological impact of food, but it's very, very hard to measure. So you cannot measure the impact your awareness campaign, or you can, but you have quite some estimation range. So then we decided, okay, at this time we will not measure, we really will measure what we can measure and on which we have impact, but it's a decision that can change coming years.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, and maybe Inês.
So it's not that it's not important, it was just relatively in our carbon footprint, it's much less important energy and mobility. And no, I don't think we should leave the responsibility to the catering actors. I think we should really be careful when we do the, how is it called, cahier des charges in English? And so to implement criteria and give the weight to these criteria. And
Yes.
we should be the ones defining the criteria that we put in the contract.
At VUB, food was 1% of the total footprint.
Yeah, at ULB it's more or less the same.
Thank you. We have another question from David Avelar, and he would like to know more about the involvement of students in the action plan and also about the carbon sequestration measures. So again, the three panelists can reply.
So for ULB, at this stage, we included the students in some of the working groups. So we reached to the students' representatives, like to know if they wanted to participate in some of the reflections. So as Alexandra said, one big next step would be to really do a more large consultation. And I forgot what the second question was, sorry. Just a second. The sequestration measures, carbon sequestration measures. Yeah, at this stage, we didn't really address that.
If it's meant as offsetting your emissions somewhere else, then we've taken it into account only for business travel. Some universities take it into account for their whole footprint, and they say, okay, we're carbon neutral already. Or do you mean carbon sequestration on campus if you have a lot of domains? As city campus, you cannot do any sequestration on campus because you have only very small terrains, or you can do, but it only covers a very small part of your carbon footprint. I hope this can serve as an answer.
Thank you. No, and I take the opportunity to say that this is a working group, so any participant who would like to go deeper on some, these are very important topics. We only have a few minutes now, but please feel free to contact by email the UNICA office and then or directly the speakers. I mean, we're a community, so again, this conversation can be even deeper. So at this point, we try to cover some of the questions we receive, but some of the questions you are raising may be the topic of other webinars in 2021. So, and another point is coming from Boris Koryuzniak, and then he would like to know more about the principles, tools for measuring the carbon footprint at universities. I know there are many documents, but the panelists can tell much better than me.
We've decided on several ways to use specifically the bilan carbone methodology. So the French methodology, you also have the DEFRA, it's also a very known one, the British tool often used. I think you need for your university to look at your, to make a benchmark with other universities with which you want to measure or to compare yourself. And if you want to more dive deeply into the methodology we used, just as an example, you can look at our reports. They are fully available online in English.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we have another question from Teresa Zmuzhova from Charles University of Prague. And then she's asking, did you involve your own research capacities or did you use an external assessor? Is there any link to research or education activities?
So yes, we use both internal and external expertise. They have different, say, roles. We have what we call a task force. So they give us input on the work we are doing. We have one for climate. We have one for specific topics like energy, mobility, etc. But at some point we need really to deliver. In this case, to deliver like on sharp deadlines. In this case, we usually take external experts like in carbon accountancy, etc.
Mm-hmm. We had the same approach. We had also a working group at VUB with academics who really know in detail on all the topics and on all the estimations made. They really helped us with processing this. But we've used we used the capacity of students in a lot of pre-research. So they really helped us with finding data, doing surveys, writing short papers, and that we could also use as input, raw input for the first steps. So that was really helpful, and they love to do that too.
Luciano, if I can add something.
Please, of course.
I just want, because I see another question regarding that, regarding our carbon footprint and the monitoring of our carbon footprint. The idea now is that we are really owner of the spreadsheet, the timesheet, and the methodology. And the idea is now that I don't know if it would be each year, but probably each 3 years, it's the student who will manage with teachers on the schools academy or service school or an engineer academy. They will manage our carbon footprint monitoring now.
So for example, this year we had a group of students from business school analyzing our data for travel, for example.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And now we have another question from Kostas Karalambous, hope pronunciation is not too wrong, from the University of Cyprus, and is asking, how do you adjust baseline data according to external disturbances, such as different year, by year of climatic conditions, different number of students, different occupied space?
It asks for it demands a lot of documenting, saying what did you take into account. You end up with the total pie. Like for us, it was 42,000 tons of CO2, but it doesn't say anything. So you have to recalculate it. And some universities decide is to use the research funds they have in total. Others decide to use the students. So per student capita, footprint per student capita, you have to decide for your own to which activity factor you use to express your footprint per capita per euro.
Perfect. Other comments on this, or I proceed with now there is another, in my opinion, very interesting question from Katrin Sierkens, and this is related to working from home. So she's asking if working from home and online teaching are implemented on large scale, does scope 3 needs to be adapted to include energy use, like heating, electricity of students and employees? Is it expected to have a significant impact? And indeed, this is something that I wanted to ask also. I mean, if you are calculating very well the impact of this tragic COVID-19, that indeed, I think 2020 pushed all of us to work online for several months in many countries. And we are discussing this in many other fora. And indeed, we expect to go back to a new normal in which the activities will not be in person like before. I mean, we will probably go towards the hybrid model, and many activities for students and staff, again, will be also performed online. So if you already have a good data, of a kind of a forecast of what can happen in 2021 already due to the COVID crisis. Big topic for all the panelists.
Would you like to answer, Alexandra? Yeah, okay. We have a group of students working on a paper on that because we were also questioning this. But there are a lot of scenarios, of course. It depends of your commuting distance. So in the VUB's case, we have very long commuting distances. That will probably, the impact of that, the reducing these distances will be bigger than the extra heating put on at home. But you need a lot of scenarios. It also depends if the people are coming by car or by train. So Friday afternoon, the paper will be presented. I don't know the results yet, but I'm also curious how it will appear, and it will also depend of your specific university.
On our side, I don't have few to explain because no, it's too. We are too from scratch from COVID now. We don't. We have to include it. We have to thinking about, but it's too much a nightmare for the moment. Then no, we don't work on it.
I understand. But this
Thank you for your question.
This is a topic. I mean, that maybe in one of the webinars in 2021, I think we should address. Together with other changes again that we are looking at in UNICA for education, research. I mean, all UNICA activities also change. I mean, ourselves, I think we also contributed, I mean, unfortunately, due to this crisis, really a reduction of CO2 emission, because UNICA events in 2020 were mainly completely online. So then I have to say there was a final question on carbon footprint, but I think already Alexandra replied to that in her intervention. So it's almost 12. And one of my jokes is that as Italian, I try to keep the time very carefully because I don't like the stereotype of Italians being late. So let me ask the panelists a very short statement, 1 minute each, to conclude the webinar. So maybe we start in the same order with Rebecca, Inês, and then Alexandra. One final statement.
Well, it's a wonderful journey. A lot of people are going to start coming. Yes, enjoy it, find partners for it, look at your data. Please write down every step you take so that you can repeat it in a few years for your monitoring, and good luck.
Thank you. Inês?
What can I add? Like, I think I have worked for at least the 10 next years. And of course, if you want to exchange more, know more, you can join UNICA Green, where we can share in more detail and exchange about it.
Just a few words on climate action plan. It's really a tool, but a powerful tool in order to work on transversality, on coherence, and breaking the silo, then using like a tool.
Perfect. So again, we conclude now. So thank you very much to the three speakers for the excellent presentations. I would like to thank all the participants of this working group, again, which is really an excellent UNICA working group. I encourage you to participate in the next webinars. You saw on the UNICA website, we have a calendar of very interesting webinars already planned for 2021. And please feel free to propose other topics. I mean, this is an open working group, so if you have other ideas, things that you feel that are very relevant for you, for your university, please propose. Let me thank again the coordinators of this working group, Inês and Delphine. They're doing an amazing job. And let me also thank very much the UNICA office. We have online Laura Brossico and Laura Colò, because I mean, all these activities, they need also a lot of work from the office, and they are always online ready to help. So thank you very much to all of them. So I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all of you, and see you online very soon in another UNICA event. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.